Okay, so this I have to send you the sample classes. I've not yet done that. I'll send you some sample classes, audio and video, and I'll share you into your folder also. I will share you into the folder as students, like one course which we have completed, IPM, okay, which is the introductory course. So I will share you, just like you have the lab student folder, I will share you with view rights into the IPM folder. Okay, this is just for your finance elective choice. If you want to select whatever when you come to your elective decision, because I know that's a big decision that people have difficulty with. What subject should I take? The simple answer is you should select a subject which is interesting to you. That's all basically. And of course, the finance electives, the way they are taught actually is quite different from the FM1 and FM2. The FM1, FM2 tends to be more theoretical and based on textbooks, but this is a slightly different way of teaching. It's more like law, so you can get a flavor of that from by navigating those IPM folders. So I would suggest that you first navigate through those folders, go through the YouTube classes of finance, and then you decide whether this is something that appeals to you. If you find it interesting, all that is required is that there should be interest. Okay, you don't need to have very high levels of maths or anything like that, but there should be. Without interest, there's no point. Okay, because if you are not interested in the subject, then you are going to get completely bored, because it is very complicated, very dense, and if you have more interest, then you will just be completely switched off. So you'll have a terrible time. It's better to take a HR or marketing or something like that, which is not going to be that complicated. Okay, it's going to be, it will require a lot of work even there, but it won't be so complicated. Okay, so let's go on to the part that where I started rushing. I started rushing here, I think. I want to just spend a little bit of time on this. So this book, we were talking about self-improvement and observing your own thoughts, okay, and basically being alert to how your own thinking process might undermine your own outcomes. What kind of outcomes you achieve in life, they get undermined by the way you think. Okay, so so I think it's a pretty important point to note here. I'll just put it here as a big in caps. Okay, this is a very this is actually coming out of some, I forget who actually said this, but this is so important that I thought we should write this down. Everything that happens to you reflects your mindset. So this is a pretty stunning kind of statement if you think about it, but I think it's important to think about this. I wish somebody had told me this when I only came across this when I was in my 40s. So when I wish somebody had told me this when I was like a teenager or something, because it's quite a stunning statement, and then eventually one day you realize it's actually true. So I think it's very important to be aware of this. Okay, so this book by Epictetus, I think is a very important book. Roman soldiers used to carry this book into battle. Okay, it is almost kind of like the Gita or something like that. So, and there are actually a lot of similarities between the message of the Gita and this one. So this is and it's written in slightly old style, but it's quite simple still. So I think it's available for free. I would encourage everyone to read it. I think it's a very important book from a personal effectiveness point of view, your whole approach to life. And then if you want to spend money on the Anthony Robbins book, you can do that. I think personally, if you just do this, that is sufficient. But this is a little bit extra on other stuff. Okay, this is again, if you want to read, this is more the Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, his Meditations. This is quite a famous work in philosophy. This is also interesting, but it's not so important. The most important is to read this book by Epictetus. Okay, so that's one here. You can just read this article here. So Kaizen I've talked about. Okay, I just want to talk briefly about, you know what MOOCs are? You know what the full form of this is? The S is just for plural. Do you know what the full form of this is? No? Okay, anybody here plays computer games? You play computer games? So what is MMORPG in computer games? Okay, so this is MMORPG stands for Massively Multiplayer Online Role-Playing Games. You play some of those games, I guess. Okay, so so this MOOCs abbreviation came from there. MOOC stands for Massively Online or Massive Online Open Courses. Okay, so it's massive because they have many students. Online because it's online, it's not physical like we are here. And then open, massively online open courses. Open because it's open to everybody, everywhere, anywhere in the world. Okay, so I'll show you some portals. and the courses, obviously you understand these are courses, okay? So this is a spreadsheet that is there in your folder. This is what I briefly discussed yesterday. So I think it's important to explain this a little bit, how you're going to go about it. This is just one of those websites, edX. This is a Harvard MIT collaboration. It's actually run by an Indian professor. Okay, so this, if you take edX, if you just take edX, I put the important ones in blue, cyan actually. So this is also important. Khan Academy is actually very good for maths and stats. The other subjects I would not take them seriously, but they're very good for maths and stats, okay? So if you want to brush up on your maths and stats, you can go here. And for edX, you can, let's just take edX as an example, what you're going to do. There's another link to edX in your notes itself, but let's go through the spreadsheet. So remember here now, this is very important that you should not neglect your DSB work. Okay, take care of your basic coursework first, and this is over and above. Okay, so this is because you know, like, it's a way of sort of further buttressing your CV, improving your CV, because remember, the whole goal is that at placement you should be able to score big. You should be able to blow away the companies at placement. Okay, so one of the things that I don't know why it's taking so long to open. Let's click here and see what happens. This is better. So this basically, the strategy here is that obviously you have to first take care of your DSB coursework, but then that is not enough. It's because it's a very competitive world. Okay, so when you over and above your DSB coursework, I've given you all the instructions on domain knowledge, how you have to continuously monitor business news, all that stuff you're doing. But you're so young, you have so much energy, you can do all of this. Okay, if you're sufficiently systematic and disciplined, you can do all of this. Okay, so this is the third part of it, where you add, the idea is eventually you're going to add some of these courses to your CV. Okay, and I'll just show you how you can do that. Let me just make this. Okay, all right, so you come here, find courses. Let's go to find courses, and I'll just give you an example as to how to proceed. All right, so you have courses on all kinds of stuff. You can search by subject. Okay, let's take whatever course you want. Let's say you take a course on communication. Okay, let's say you take this. This is Delft. Delft is a Dutch university. Okay, so you can take, it's quite a well-known university. This is Technical University of Delft. It's in Holland. Okay, this course is part of a certificate program, which is basically you do a few of this. It's part of a series. So you do a few courses and you get like a series certification in communication, which means you've done 5-6 courses in communications. Okay. Now, okay. Now you see here it says free. Okay. And so it says free, and it says add a verified certificate for $125. Okay, so what I would recommend in general is that you don't need to waste your money. I mean, if you really want to waste your money, you can always do that. But if you don't really need to waste your money to get a certificate, all you need to do is you make sure that you do. So this is where you learn another term when it comes to learning. Okay, we discussed yesterday about seminar style teaching versus lecture tutorial style, etc. So this is where you're learning more about the terms that are used in education. Okay, one of these terms is auditing a course. Have you heard the expression auditing a course? Right? Okay, so auditing a course means essentially you don't get a official certification for doing that course, but you get to sit in the class and you can still learn. You can learn as much as anybody else in the course. It's just that you don't get an official stamp saying so and so attended this course. Okay, so the idea is that your basic strategy here should be no need to go for a certificate. You go for the free part, which means you get to audit the course. So all the material that is there in the course will be provided to you. Okay, and you can go through the course. So what you really have to do is, once you select a course, you make sure you do the course seriously, which means whatever material is there in the course, you should have mastered that material. Okay, it doesn't matter that you don't have a certificate. Once you've mastered the material, then you can put this course on your, I'll show you the formats also to do it. You will put this on your CV saying that I have done these additional courses from edX, okay, or from these MOOC portals, and you will put this course saying this course name from TU Delft, I've done it. The main thing is that you should be, once you put it on your CV, you must be confident that you've mastered the material in the course. Because if people ask you anything about the course, you should be able to answer confidently. And it will not matter that you don't have a certificate. You say that, I didn't want to spend money on a certificate because at that time I didn't want to, whatever, I was not sure how much value there would be and all that. So you can just give some excuse. So that it's not important to have a certificate, that it is sufficient. This is a broad strategy that you have, okay? So I've just shown you one example of a course, okay? You register, obviously you have to register. And then there are some dummy courses where basically there's a course teaching you about how to do the course on this platform. Okay, so this is another important skill that you guys need to acquire, because these platforms will be around for a long time now. So in this modern age, one of the things that students have to learn is also, the reason I'm directing you to this is, you also need to learn how to make use of these MOOC portals. Because in your career, you will have to keep on upgrading your skills. After, let's say, every 3 years or so in the industry, you should think about, okay, now what can I do again to upgrade my skills? Okay, maybe learn a new language or something like that, whatever it is, okay? So this is going to be a part of your life. So one of the things you need to learn is how to make use of these portals and how to do courses through these portals. That is also part of the learning. Initially, when you're just there, you don't even know how to proceed, right? So get familiar with this. So this is an important part of your learning as well, because modern day students must know how to make use of MOOCs. Okay, these are there, these things are there to stay. All right, so is this clear now? You register. Okay, then if you have a problem, you can ask me. Then you just register. So you select your courses according to your interest areas. So you can see the course load and all is given to you, 4 to 5 hours per week, 5 weeks, etc. So make sure, as I said once again, don't neglect your DSB coursework over and above. Okay, and then we put it on the. Okay, so is this clear now? How are you going to make use of this? Okay, and then there are some other resources that are put here. You can actually explore them if you want. Okay. So I'm going to just close this. All right. So, okay. So skills, etc. So this is part of this whole Kaizen philosophy, right? Every few months, whenever you get some time, you add another course. You do a course and keep on. You look at your whole skill set as continuously improving your skill set, continuously expanding your skill set. So that is the whole idea. Okay. All right. So here, as this is already done. So as I said, developing skills. Okay. And then the last part I already mentioned yesterday about coding. Okay, everyone in the modern world needs to have some kind of familiarity with coding. You don't have to become an expert, but you should know what is involved. You should know how to think like a programmer in a systematic way. And Python is a good language to learn. So I've given you this course. This is actually one other of the MOOC portals. OCW stands for Open Courseware. It's an MIT website where they make all the MIT courses available for free. All the course material. So if you go here, they will direct you once again to the MOOC portal. Okay, this is one of the famous courses of introductory. Yeah, you can come, but you won't get attendance. Okay, so your choice whether you want to attend or not. Okay, so this is a basic course. Now you see, when you go to this course, you can obviously get the lecture videos and all that stuff. And then here it says somewhere where I saw that yesterday, or maybe yeah, you see this here. So here you're going to the MIT OCW website, okay, which is hosted by MIT, but they're also showing you that we are offering a free version of this subject on edX. These are the courses, so you can go back to edX if you want. Okay, so you can just explore this. So it's a good thing. So I would say, once again, just give it a shot and get a feel for what is involved in programming, so that you get that's an important thing. If you're able to do it reasonably well, again, this is another thing that you can put on your CV. And then, if you guys take IT as a specialization, we are actually, I think, teaching all these. We are teaching Python also. Okay, you have an introduction, so you'll get some hands-on experience as well. So it's a good idea to try and do this before you get to your second year, if you want to take IT as a specialization, before you get to that stage. Okay, so that's another idea. Okay. All right. So here, I think this finishes our introductory Unit 0 discussion. Now we can go on to. Okay, now we start our, so this unit, now you'll find that this is already in your lecture notes, okay? In the lecture notes folder, unit-wise notes folder, this Unit 1 is already in your folder, okay? So you can study this on your own later on. Okay, so we're just starting this particular unit, the first unit. This is, now you might find this is a little bit theoretical, and again, as I said, we discussed, Ahmed, you just came in. Okay. So you might find this is a little bit theoretical, and you might get a little bit bored. But as I said to you yesterday, every type of material is not conducive to the case method. Okay, so we should use the method which is the most efficient for that type of material. Okay, so some of the theoretical material, like what we are going to discuss in Unit 1, is not conducive for interactive discussion because it's not efficient. Okay, so therefore you have to make an effort to engage. Okay, whatever I'm teaching you obviously is stuff that you guys need to learn. So you have to see it as this is something that I need to learn. Whether it's interactive or I'm not going to like have balloons and whistles and this and that to try and make it interesting for you. That's not going to happen. So you have to make an effort to engage with the material. Okay. All right. So the first thing now here in jurisprudence and legal theory, what we try to do. This is again unusual in terms of what is taught in business school lab courses. In business school lab courses, typically this kind of unit does not exist. Okay, typically it goes straight into a textbook and typical particular areas of the law like contracts, etc. But I put this in because I feel that this kind of basic theoretical grounding is important to understand how judgments, because we are also studying it in a slightly different way. We're going to study judgments. So to understand judgments, some of these things need to be understood. Okay. So some of the concepts that we are, so these are just concepts that, so you can look at this like the first concept that you need to learn is the difference between normative and positive. Okay. So these are just things that you have to internalize and understand the concept. Okay. So there's a nice video here by this Yale professor, Ayres. You can actually see this on your own. Okay. And you can also look at you got to read all this stuff. Okay, you got to read this, and I'll just briefly tell you about this website. Okay, so you have to read this. I'll explain to you briefly. So the way it works in class is that I will briefly explain to you the gist of these concepts. Okay, and then you have the notes. You study them on your own. When you have to go back and revise. And then if you have any particular problems, any part which you don't understand, then you have to ask me. Okay, then I'll explain it once again in the class. Okay, yeah.
Can I turn on this light?
Yeah, you want to switch off this light? Yeah, I just hope come and try. I just hope I should be able to see my keyboard. Maybe I need a little table lamp or something like that. I'll ask Lalita to give me a table lamp. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I think this is better. You should be able to see it. I was also feeling that it was too bright. Okay, right, guys. So the first point is normative versus positive. For that, you're going to listen to this video on YouTube. You're going to do that on your own. This also you're going to read on your own. I'll explain the concept. And let me just tell you briefly about this particular website. Okay, positive versus normative here. And then before we get to this discussion, let me just explain about this website. Now, you guys are learning economics. Okay, you have some courses on economics. I think you're doing ME now. This is the first economics course you're doing. Okay. Now, in most economics textbooks, economics is taught as a very mathematical subject, okay, with a lot of calculus and stuff like that. So, I personally don't agree with that way of teaching economics because I don't think it's appropriate. And this is a very interesting website. So, but I think economics is still an important subject. You need to understand the basic principles of economics. Okay, so no matter whether, it doesn't matter whether you go into finance as a specialization or not. So this is a very good website which deals with economic concepts in microeconomics and macroeconomics in a non-mathematical way, in a logical, intuitive way. Okay, so I think if you want to learn, this is another way to learn economics. So I would encourage everyone to make sure that you, of course, first, once again, you take care of your coursework first. But if you want to test your own knowledge of economics, okay, you should just bookmark this website, go there and look at the table of contents. And then you can see here all this, you have micro and macro based topics. Make sure you understand this is something that you need to have, like a basic knowledge, just like your accounting, double entry, bookkeeping, etc. These are things that you need to know as a graduating MBA student. Okay, so make sure that, so this is a test for you. Make sure that you go through this website and you can understand all of the concepts that are written here. Okay, there's nothing, no mathematics is used, all logical, intuitive explanations. So you can bookmark this website from this particular link. Okay, and so right now we're going to study normative versus positive. Here. All right. Now, okay, so you can study this essentially. So I'll just briefly explain to you what is positive versus normative. Positive, as you can see here, is this font big enough for you guys at the back? Okay. So positive essentially is a statement about what is. Okay, so I say that okay, this building is LEED certified, or okay, this road is not paved, etc. So I'm making statements about what is, okay, about a state of affairs. And whereas a normative statement is a statement about what should be, okay, like we should have a better grading system, or we should have the police should not be so corrupt, or whatever, okay, should be, should not be, etc. Okay, these are kinds of statements. So this is the difference between normative and positive broadly. Okay, so you should be able to understand the test that you have understood these concepts is that if you get a particular statement, you should be able to identify that this statement is a positive statement, and otherwise if you get another statement, this should be you will identify it as a normative statement. Okay, or sometimes you can even apply it to discussions, some discussions or debates that you're having. Those debates will be debates about positive issues, or is it a debate about a normative issue. Okay, that is what you should be able to understand. So it's pretty simple. You just need to be aware of the terms. Okay. Now look at the first question that we have. Okay. So this is a very famous sort of socio-political debate that is it's a very hot topic in the United States. This whole question of abortion. Okay. So there you have two camps. It's important to understand all these aspects because the US is such a big and important country. It's useful to look at their, the issues that prevail there. So pro-life is basically people who are opposed to abortion. Okay, so if you look at the extreme versions of the positions, the extreme pro-life version is that the extreme pro-life position is that life begins at conception, which is what the Pope says. So life begins at conception. So any form of abortion is not acceptable. Okay, so you have some extreme positions of one judge actually who was not nominated for a higher position. He took the view that even a rape victim who becomes pregnant with the rapist's child should not be allowed to have an abortion. So that's an extreme position because that's based on this idea of that life begins at conception, any form of. So we are looking at the extreme positions just to understand the positions. And then pro-choice, again, if you look at the extreme form of pro-choice, means that even one day before the birth of the baby, the woman should have the right to have an abortion. Okay, that's another that's an extreme version of even one day, why maybe even few hours before that she should have the right to have an abortion. Okay, so that's the extreme version of the pro-choice position. So that's called a pro-choice position, where the woman has the choice whether to have an abortion or not. So this is a very, very divisive issue in the US. So it's important to be aware of these terms as well. So now, is this, what do you think? Is this a normative debate or a positive debate? Normative? Is this clear? This is a normative debate because it's basically essentially about what should be, what is the right thing to do, etc. Now, okay, so let's understand a little bit about the second one. Obviously, the first one is normative, the second one will be positive, right? Okay, so now can you see what about this debate between Ajay and Naina? What is happening? This is a positive debate. Why? Yeah, so what is the question is what is, and another way to identify it is that this kind of debate can easily be settled. Okay, if you see the part that I put in bold, okay, you can just go to Google Maps. Actually, if you don't want to actually measure it, you can just go to Google Maps and solve this problem. But obviously you have to understand this important point, that this is a positive debate only if they agree on what a kilometer is. Now if I start saying no, according to me a kilometer is 3 miles, then you have a problem, right? So it's important to understand that this is a positive debate only if they agree on what is a kilometer. Okay, a kilometer is 1,000 meters. If you really want to settle the debate, there's actually a bar in Paris. There's a meter bar in Paris. It's a physical meter bar in Paris which determines what is the length of 1 meter, what is 1 meter, and that's from there you get a kilometer, which is 1,000 meters. Okay, so therefore this is a positive debate only if you agree on what is a kilometer. This is clear? Okay, so the first distinction. So the one way you can use this, one way you can use this in your life is you'll notice that many times that the arguments that we get into in life are usually, you'll notice these are actually arguments about normative topics. Okay, and do you agree? A lot of the discussions and debates that we have are arguments about normative topics. And do you think that normative debates have any end? There's no end, because this, let's say, look at this pro-life, pro-choice debate. There is no end, because those who are pro-life usually are basically, they are pro-life because of a religious, mostly because of a religious, not everybody, but most of the people who are pro-life are pro-life because they are Catholic. Okay, so they are driven by their faith. So that is obviously never going to change. And those who are pro-choice, that is also a strong policy position that's never going to change. So one of the ways you can use this is that when you're having an argument, you should try and detect whether this is an argument that is this a normative debate or is this a positive debate. If it's a positive debate, like how many kilometers from here to there, you can settle that debate. But if it's a normative debate, it's not worth continuing the debate because it has no end. You're just wasting your energy. And you're argue. I mean, anyway, most of us like to argue. So we argue because you're arguing. So you should understand that you are actually arguing only because you like to argue. Because this debate has no end. Okay, so this is one way you can use it in your life in a positive way. Okay, so we're going to now look at, when we are discussing normative versus positive, we're also going to look at a few other distinctions which are quite similar to this normative positive distinction. Okay, so you need to be aware of these terms. So a lot of this, I've got some feedback from some of the other faculty members that your batch is not, you guys are not very comfortable with abstract concepts. Okay, internalizing abstract concepts. You have to get used to this, because whatever maybe your undergraduate upbringing, I mean, maybe we are taught to memorize stuff and just, you know, just regurgitate on the answer sheet and get marks. But now you have to start, because you're going into a business program. And so one of the important distinctions between an MBA and somebody who's not done an MBA is that you should have this comfort level with abstract concepts. Your theoretical grounding should be very strong. And theoretical grounding requires comfort level with abstract concepts. Okay, so you have to get used to it. Even if you're not familiar, if it's a little difficult, you have to keep pushing. You have to keep pushing and make sure that you get comfortable with it. Okay, there's no reason you can't, because it's just a matter of effort. Because the human brain is naturally is able to deal with abstract concepts. Okay, so you just have to push yourself a little bit. It's just happening because you're not used to it. Okay, so you have to be conscious that you must be comfortable with abstract concepts, with theoretical frameworks, because that's one thing that makes a difference, that marks the difference between an MBA and somebody who's not done an MBA. Okay, because strictly speaking, you don't need an MBA to run a business. Bill Gates doesn't have an MBA. Neither does Mark Zuckerberg. Okay, and then who was the guy that Bill Gates took out from? There was a guy that Bill Gates pulled out of the Stanford. Stanford is the #1 MBA program in the world. Okay, so this guy had entered into Stanford. He was in the first year of his Stanford MBA, and Bill Gates pulled him out when he was starting Microsoft, telling him that, you know, come and start this company with me. Who was the guy? Paul Allen. No, not Paul Allen, because, okay, you're right, at least you know about Paul Allen. He just passed away, actually. So the guy is Steve Ballmer. Steve Ballmer is the CEO of Microsoft until recently, before Satya Nadella took over. Okay, so Steve Ballmer is basically a marketing guy, but he was in a first year of, just imagine that being in the Stanford is such a difficult MBA program to get into. And so this guy is the first year of Stanford, and he pulls out to start a company, which obviously when you start Microsoft, you don't know what's going to happen. Okay, it might end up being a failure, but the guy goes out and starts Microsoft. So neither Ballmer doesn't have an MBA, Gates doesn't have an MBA, Zuckerberg doesn't have an MBA. Okay, Sheryl Sandberg has an MBA from Harvard Business School, but she's telling you that MBAs are not required in tech. Okay, so you don't need an MBA to run a business, but since you've got into an MBA program, okay, it has to have some value. One of the things that people will expect from an MBA student is the ability to talk intelligently about business concepts, management concepts, and be able to apply theoretical frameworks. These are things that and have good communication skills. Okay, so these are expected from MBA students. Okay, so make sure you make an effort to understand these types of these frameworks and these concepts. Okay, so the other description you can read on your own. Okay, the other description, normative versus positive. Okay, it is very similar to the distinction between what we call descriptive and prescriptive. Okay, which one do you think is, so when I'm saying that these two distinctions are similar, that means you can match, descriptive to either normative or positive, and prescriptive also. Okay, so which one do you think is, out of descriptive and prescriptive, which one do you think matches to normative? Prescriptive, okay, because prescriptive, like the doctor gives you a prescription, so he's telling you you have to take this medicine after dinner, okay, so this is what you should do, okay. So prescriptive is the same as, you can read up the definitions on your own, okay. So prescriptive is the same as, this is a descriptive, and this is, okay, I haven't clicked on prescriptive, but you can click on prescriptive and see what it says. Why is there so much noise outside? Normally whenever there's noise we blame the first years. So okay, so prescriptive here again, so you can see that prescriptive, the definition that is given of prescriptive is the same as normative. It's similar to normative, okay, and that's one of the things I follow in my teaching, is that when I'm teaching people some distinctions, I bring up all the other similar distinctions, so it's easier for you to remember them. I think it makes it easier for you to remember them, okay. So prescriptive is basically the same as normative, okay, telling people what to do, how things should be, and descriptive is just something that describes reality, okay. Now remember one thing here that is important, okay, that a positive statement need not be true, okay. I think it's kind of obvious, but I just want to make the point, okay. Need not be true, okay, just has to be, I just want to hammer home this point, it just has to be sort of verifiable, or another term that is important, falsifiable, okay. You understand this? So if I make a statement that, say, Roger Federer is less than 6 feet tall, is this a positive statement or a normative statement? The positive statement, but it's actually not true, because he's actually more than 6 feet tall. But the point is that a positive statement does not have to be true. It just has to be something that can be verified or falsified, okay. It has to be in that nature. So when I make a specific statement like this, you can obviously test it, okay. You can test it, a statement that can be objectively tested and verified to be true or falsified. Is this clear? So a positive statement need not be true, okay. All right, so here there's actually this falsifiability is also an important point. I think I'm going to just add this here. We may come back to it, so just save time, because there is a link here. So okay, so descriptive versus prescriptive, okay, and the other distinction is here, that is morality or ethics versus legality, okay. There's another distinction again which is similar to normative versus positive, okay. That is, you understand what is meant by morality. You say that something is immoral, something is unethical, okay, and then there's a distinction between what is legal and what is what is legal or illegal, and versus what is moral or amoral, okay, or immoral, okay. So that is again, once again, can you see that it's very similar to normative versus positive, okay, especially the morality and the ethics part. I may say that certain things, if you're selling somebody something, if you're maybe suppressing some information, okay, you're selling something to somebody, it may not actually be legal because the law may not have provided for it, but it might be considered unethical, okay, because you're deceiving that person, okay. So so in that sense, again, if you're saying that something is immoral, it's kind of, what is it similar to, positive or normative? Normative, right? So you're saying that you should not behave in this particular way, okay. And legality is, well, not so similar to being a positive statement, but once again, it's kind of similar because it's written down in the law, and the law says that, you know, this is what, it's a little bit outside the law, so that's similar to the positive element of it, okay. So here, the statement that I've made here, to understand, you're familiar with set theory from school, okay. So set theory is, we can close this also. Yes. Okay. So you understand what are the elements in a set? So if I take the set of all students in section A, then each one of you is an element of that set. Okay, so the set of all elements, and then of course in set theory we have this concept of the null set. You remember what is a null set? It has no elements. Okay, so for theoretical clarity, you must be clear that in every set, a null set is a member of every set, is an element of every set. Okay, so we would say that set of all students in section A is basically all of you individually as elements plus the null set, which is a set with no students. Okay, theoretically that is what we need for to be correct about the elements of a set. Okay, so what we are saying is the set of all immoral acts, okay, is likely to have more elements than the set of all illegal acts. Okay, you understand the statement? Does the statement make sense? That everything that is forbidden by law, okay, generally, that's why I put a little qualifier, is likely to have. I haven't said is. If I put in a thing like likely to have means I've kind of protected myself. I've made a slightly hedged statement. Okay, so if somebody contradicts what I say okay, all I said was it's likely to have. I didn't say it always has. Okay, so do you understand what is being said here? Just to test your understanding of set theory, just to refresh that a little bit also. That generally whatever is made forbidden, whatever is forbidden by the law is forbidden because society considers it to be immoral. Okay, so like murder is forbidden by law, so obviously murder is also considered to be immoral. Okay, theft is also considered to be immoral, it is forbidden by law. So generally you'll find that most of the things that are forbidden by law are forbidden because society considers it to be immoral. Okay, but everything that is immoral need not be forbidden by law. Okay, I think most of you are not in agreement with what I'm saying from the response that I'm getting. Are you getting what? Do you agree with the response is not, people are not convinced about what I'm saying.
Statement is not clear.
No, what I'm trying to say is that the reason I make this statement, okay, that the set of all immoral acts, okay, so let's say that there are 20 acts which are considered immoral by society, okay, but out of which only 15 have been outlawed explicitly according to the penal code. Let's say we are talking about criminal offenses. Let's say there are 20 types of offenses which are considered immoral by society, but only 15, because when you come to legality, legality is based on what is actually written down in the law. Okay, in the modern societies, you can only prosecute people for what is actually written down in the law. Alright, so therefore, out of those 20 offenses which are considered immoral by society, they may have actually made only 15 of them illegal according to the penal code. Right? So if you are talking about any of those 5 offenses which have not been made illegal, they may still be immoral, but you can't punish people for them because they have not been made illegal by law. Is this clear? Is it a little clearer now? Okay, that's what I'm saying. Essentially that everything that is, so this kind of distinction you have to get comfortable with, because when we come into contract law and every other aspect of the law, that's why it's very related to set theory. Set theory is a very important branch of maths which helps you a lot in logic also. So the idea here is that everything that has been made illegal, now again, not 100% true all the time, but generally it is true that everything that has been made illegal by the law, okay, explicitly forbidden by the law, okay, like murder, theft, okay, robbery, okay, all these things. If they have been forbidden by the law, it is because they have been so forbidden because society considers those actions to be immoral or unethical. Okay, that is something that people should not do. That's why they have been forbidden by the law. Okay, but everything that society considers to be immoral need not have been forbidden by law. Okay, you might have certain types of actions which we all consider immoral, which we'll see. Once again, we are just going to see an example of that. Okay, which may not have been made illegal by society, so therefore you can't punish people for it. You can say it's unethical because a lot of the things that happen, for instance, like mis-selling. Okay, you might have heard this in the case of some of people you know. A lot of these salespeople in banks and insurance companies, this happened a lot with the ULIP plans, the unit-linked insurance plans. A lot of people were sold these because they have very high commissions. Okay, so these guys have a huge incentive. The salespeople have a huge incentive to sell these plans. So they sell these plans, the unit-linked insurance plans, to people who don't understand the product properly. Okay, a lot of people, senior citizens, retirees and all, they don't understand the product properly. They just sell it to them somehow by just telling them whatever they need to tell them to sell the product. And they sell it, and so then these guys are sitting on losses, even though the stock market has gone up, but these guys are still sitting on losses on ULIP plans. Okay, these ULIP investments. Okay, so this, you could say this is unethical or this is immoral because these salesmen have actually in some way, like that story from the Mahabharata, right? The Ashwatthama, when Dronacharya's son Ashwatthama, they wanted to give him the impression that his son had been killed but actually it was an elephant that had been killed, right? So then under his breath he said that, but that's an elephant. Okay, so Ashwatthama is dead. So that obviously is not ethical, right? Remember? So that's why what happened to Yudhishthir after that? You know the story? No, okay, so the point is that because Dronacharya, so let's discuss a little mythology, it's very interesting. Okay, so because Dronacharya could not be defeated, okay, so they had to find a way to kill him. They could not kill him, even Arjun could not kill him. So they basically had to find a way to get him to lay down his arms. So they got Yudhishthira, so they got somebody to tell him that your son Ashwatthama is dead in battle. So because Dronacharya didn't want it to be sure, and so he asked the only person who would never tell a lie, that is Yudhishthira. Okay, so he asked Yudhishthira, is Ashwatthama dead? And Yudhishthira said, yes, Ashwatthama is dead. But then under his breath, softly he said, but it's the elephant. It was an elephant called Ashwatthama who was dead. Okay, but his son Ashwatthama was not dead. So that's why he said, first he said, yes, Ashwatthama is dead, but it's the elephant under his breath. So the elephant part, Dronacharya didn't hear. So when he heard that his son was dead, he, out of dejection, he laid down his arms, and that's when Arjun shot an arrow and killed him. Okay, so after this, because Yudhishthira had never told a lie before, so after that, and that's why Yudhishthira's chariot used to always ride about 4 inches above, it never used to touch the ground. So that's after this incident, his chariot came down to the ground and it used to always run on the ground. This is what happened to him after this particular incident. And that's why he had to actually, when they all went to heaven, right? That's why Yudhishthira never went to hell. All the others went to hell for a while. But Yudhishthira had to actually do a conducted tour of hell and see all his brothers and Draupadi suffering. Because, and why did I have to do this? They mentioned this incident, that you had told this lie, right? So anyway, this is fascinating stuff. So mythology is just fun to discuss. Okay, but anyway, you learned a little bit about our mythology, right? Okay, guys, so is this point clearer now?
Yes, sir.
That morality versus legality. Generally, whatever is illegal is considered immoral. Okay, but everything that is considered immoral may not have been forbidden by society explicitly, and we see an example of this. Okay, and this will also help us to read, learn how to get to know how to read statutes. Although this is a penal statute, and we are only concerned with business law, but the statutes are written in the same way. Okay.
This also happened with the case of ICICI Bank when they distributed a lot of credit cards to people, which they thought will be a profit, but eventually it came a loss because people left their houses, ran out by taking the credit cards, and the company had to face a lot of losses because of that.
Okay, I'm not familiar with this particular incident, but yeah, all these cases of unethical behavior, which you would all consider unethical behavior, but you can't always punish people for it, because in our modern societies you can only punish people for explicit breaches of the law. That's why it's so difficult to get a lot of people who clearly are criminals, but you can't really get them because you have to get them on a particular violation of a section. Okay, so let's look at a particular section now, which this section has actually recently been overturned by the Supreme Court. You might have heard of this judgment. Okay, but we'll study it anyway because it's a complicated kind of section, and it will get you familiar with this idea of morality versus legality. Okay, so let's read this section, which is 497 of the IPC. So remember, very recent judgment has actually okay, so let's read this judgment and let's try to see. This is how normally judgments are written. Okay, now you read this judgment. Now then after that I'll ask you some questions. Okay, so read this judgment. Sorry, not the judgment, but the section. This is 497 of the Indian Penal Code. The Indian Penal Code is one of the most voluminous and comprehensive penal codes in the whole world. It was written by a Britisher called Charles Macaulay. Okay, it's a huge piece of legislation. You can already see it's got over 500, I think 530 or so sections. So read this, then we'll discuss some questions. Done. You don't have to memorize it because we have the text on the other page also, because then we'll go on to the other page where we're going to look at the text in a slightly different way. Is this clear? Have you read it? You read it? Okay, now most legislation is written like this. They don't really take a great deal of care with respect to punctuation marks. Okay, punctuation is very important in written English. Okay, especially people use underutilized commas, okay, and dashes and all that. They don't really break up sentences. Very badly written. But look at this. We try to break it up a little bit in a slightly, so makes it easier to read. This font is big enough still at the back? Okay, all right. Okay, so maybe I can make this 130 here. It will be little, if you can still see it. Yeah, I think it's a little better. Maybe I can make it 135. Okay, this is even better. Okay, so now let's read this 497. Now you see what I've done. I've broken up the section. Okay, and the part which deals with the punishment, I've just made it very small because we are not really concerned with the punishment, but we should be aware that this term also exists. Maybe we'll just make it back into the same font size so that okay, so there is a part that deals with punishment also. So now you see how I've broken it up. This is how you have to read sections, okay? Because one of the messages of this particular course is going to be that you have to be very comfortable. You should not be treating the law as something that, okay, is done only by lawyers, okay? Because the quality of legal education in India is very poor. So it's very likely that if you have to actually deal with a legal problem, you might find a lawyer who doesn't know much about the law. So you are going to use this course to get completely immersed in the law, and you should be comfortable reading judgments. You should be comfortable reading statutes, so that if you have to, God forbid, ever deal with litigation in your own life, you should take charge of the litigation. You should read the section on your own, okay, and make sure you understand the section, make sure you understand the case laws that are being used. You have to manage the litigation. You can't rely on the lawyers, okay? So that's one of the things, hopefully, that you're able to, at least you'll get comfortable with the idea. Okay, so the first thing you have to know is how to break up the sections when you're reading it, okay? So you see how I've broken this up, okay, into different parts, okay? And so the punishment, if you're not concerned with the punishment, you can just, separate that out, okay? And then you see the last part. Okay, so now you've read the section. I can put that there. Now let's go through the questions, okay? Say Tom and Jane are married. Okay, we have to make another assumption, okay, since we are going to use the word affair. Okay, now let's deal with the questions. Question number 1. Is Tom guilty?
No.
He's not guilty. Why?
Because Chitra is single.
Because Chitra is single. Okay, so, but now let's come to this question. Now let's come back to this question of, so under the Indian Penal Code, Tom, despite being married, he can have an affair with Chitra and it will not be punishable under the law. Okay, so it's not illegal. But is it immoral?
Yes.
It is immoral because he is breaking the marriage vows, because the vows of fidelity are on both sides, okay, are reciprocal. So here you can see one example of what is meant by, what is the distinction between morality and legality, okay. Now of course it's this whole section has been struck down, okay, but we are just discussing it because it's a very recent striking down of the section, but it's still worthwhile to discuss, where we had this law on the books for many years, and in the past when it was challenged, it was not allowed, the challenge was not allowed. Okay, so you can see here in the first case that this is the difference between morality and legality. Okay, his actions would still be immoral, unethical, but it would not be, they would not be illegal. Okay, he could not be punished. Okay, now second, 2.1, is Rajan guilty?
Yes.
Yeah, he's guilty. Okay. Okay, so we have Rajan. Okay, so we have Rajan here. Okay, so Rajan is guilty. Okay, so let's send him to jail. All right. So now he's guilty because why?
Because Jane is married.
Because Jane is married. Okay. Now if you look at 2.1b, what if he had the consent of Tom?
He's not guilty.
He is not guilty. Okay, because what does the law say here? He is only guilty if he is doing it without the consent or connivance of that man. Okay? Yeah.
So why Rajan is guilty? I mean, isn't it a two-way process? I mean, maybe Jane was also equally interested.
No, you're saying that Jane was also she initiated the affair.
if they both have an affair.
Yeah, so Jane was also a willing participant, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm assuming both.
Both are willing. Okay, we come to that now. We'll come to that a little bit later. But I think here you have to also understand, here we are asking from a legal point of view. Most of these questions are from a legal point of view, and sometimes I'm asking you from a moral point of view. But I think you're talking more from a moral point of view at this stage. You're talking more from a moral point of view, and that's why we are trying to use this section to understand the difference in morality and legality. Okay, that everything that is immoral need not be illegal. Okay, so we'll come to that. You'll see the answer to your question. For the moment, you have an idea that, okay, you probably are mixing up morality and legality. Okay, so at a time you can't mix up both. Obviously, the first approach has to be on the legal grounds. You can only prosecute people in modern societies, in the modern Western societies. We are also a Western style society because our legal system comes from England. So in these kinds of societies, these modern Western style liberal democracies, okay, like India, US, UK, Canada, you can only prosecute people for explicit violations of the law. You can't just say, okay, I don't like the color of your tie, let's put him in jail. Okay, so that you can do in certain other countries. Okay, but here you can't. So is Rajan guilty under law? He is guilty because he has had an affair with a woman who is married. Okay, this is clear. That's why he is being caught under that provision. Now B is, what if Rajan had the consent? In that case, it's not. Okay. Now again, here you can once again bring in the element of morality. Do you think that if just because he has Tom's consent, is that legal, or I mean, is that moral or ethical?
No.
Okay, it is not moral or ethical, but it does not seem moral or ethical to most people, but it is legal. Okay, so once again you can see the distinction between morality and ethics on the one side and what is legal or illegal on the other side. Okay. All right. Now then the second 2.2. Okay. Now this is coming to your question. Okay. If you see, the answer to your question was already in the last part of the section. The last part of the section, which are broken up again as a separate component, which is that in such case, that in all cases which are deemed to be cases of adultery, the wife shall not be punishable as an abettor. You know what an abettor is? An abettor is somebody who encourages somebody to commit a crime. Okay, so if I tell somebody, like, go beat up that person, and then they go and beat up that person, that not only the guy who beats up the person will be, not only will he be punished, but I will also be punished because I have abetted him to commit the offense. Abetting means encouraging a person to do something, and usually it's used in the context of illegal actions. Okay, so you have that's why you have this thing called abetment to suicide. That's so in many of the cases where a wife commits suicide, the husband is charged with, like what is happening in the case of Sashi Tharoor. Okay, so I think there may be some other sections also, but I think one of the obvious cases is if she's doing, because we don't even know for sure whether she's like, that's a case of suicide or murder. That's also not clear. But if it's a case of suicide, then he could be charged for abetment to suicide. That means he must have made her life so miserable that it drove her to suicide. So that's an offense under the Indian Penal Code, abetment to suicide. So that means you're essentially pushing the person to do something which is illegal. Okay, in this case, so abettor means someone who encourages the actor to commit the offense. Okay, does not himself commit the offense, but he encourages them to commit the offense. Okay. All right, so in this case it says, in such case the wife, so in all cases of adultery, the wife shall not be punishable as an abettor. Okay, so it's a blanket provision, which means whether the wife, your statement is correct, because if they had an affair, okay, and then as it says here that such sexual intercourse not amounting to the offense of rape. So there's no allegation of rape, they had an affair, that means it must have been consensual. Okay, so the wife is also a willing participant, but it clearly says here, in a blanket provision, the wife shall not be punishable as an abettor. Okay, so essentially here, so that's why what you're saying, morally, ethically, it's correct, but legally it's not correct, because the law has given an escape clause there. The wife shall not be punishable as an abettor.
So law has made men are always right.
Sorry?
So law has made men are always right.
Yeah, you could say that. But now this provision has been struck down by the Supreme Court very recently. Okay, it's been. I'll give you the link also where that judgment is discussed. But very recently it has been struck down as being unequal. You can already see here that it's unequal because the husband was allowed to cheat on his wife and there would be no punishment as long as his lover was not married. Okay, but the wife was not allowed to cheat on the husband with another person. Okay, because the other person, her wife's lover would be punished, but the husband's lover would not be punished. So there is asymmetric treatment of the sexes. Okay, so this is happening because they're actually very old. This is the British era law. Okay, obviously penal code comes. It's written by the British. This obviously was written in those days, but now in England also this is not an offence. In most of the modern Western countries, adultery is a private wrong. It's not a public wrong. Okay, so we are not, the penal code, it should not even be in the penal code, because penal code is concerned with things that cause consternation to people around, general public. Okay, you go around, destroying property, a gang of people is going around destroying everybody's property. That's a public offense. So that's why we punish those kind of things. Adultery is really between the husband and the wife. It's not really concerning, it doesn't concern anybody else. So anyway, so this has been struck down, but the point is to understand here, to see the section, to see how sections are worded, because every section, whether it's civil law, criminal law, will be worded like this. Okay. So you get comfortable with the wording of sections and you learn how to break up the sections. When you read the sections, you have to break it up to make it, more sort of intelligible, because they don't use proper punctuation. And then to understand also the difference between legality and morality. And so when you're discussing, like what he was doing, that when you're discussing something, when you're looking at something, you should not confuse legality and morality. You have to look at them separately. Okay, you can obviously look at the moral questions, but you have to see, strictly speaking, what can actually be punished under the law. That part also you should be very clear about. Okay. Alright, so this obviously you can see here what is happening is here this is a very old law, so it flows from this concept of woman as a property of man. So that's why there's the element of consent. Okay, so if I catch you using my tablet, my laptop, I didn't give you any permission, then I can actually say that you're doing something wrong. But if I gave you permission to use my laptop, then I can no longer say anything because I gave you permission. So it's just basically the idea that, because in the olden days the idea was that woman was the property of the man, which is what the Supreme Court has now said, that this is not the way to treat. In this modern age, we can't have this kind of law, so they have struck it down. Okay, so you can understand why these kinds of provisions come up. Okay, all right. So this is the case that you guys can read if you want to. Okay, this is the case that came before the Supreme Court. This is 1985, I think. If this case is very old, yeah, 1985. So this is actually very interesting, and it's when you look at the opinions of judges, if you're familiar with some of the judges of the Supreme Court. Okay, so this particular here, the author is this Justice Chandrachud. He actually, this is the case. Saumitri Vishnu was a lady, and she, while her divorce proceedings were going on, but the divorce was not final, so she had an affair with someone. So the husband prosecuted that the wife's lover under this section. Okay. So then the wife brought this case saying that this is this violates Article 14. Article 14 is an equality provision in our constitution. Okay, so it violates Article 14, and that's why you see she is the petitioner. Okay, she came with this petition before the Supreme Court, but actually this Justice Chandrachud, he shot down that appeal. He shot down that petition, and he said that no, we are not going to just interfere, and this is the right law, this is the correct law, and all this. So this happened in 1985. So this recent Supreme Court ruling where they have struck down this provision, that actually reverses this kind of decision. Okay, so you can see 1985, they were not willing to strike down 497 of IPC, which was obviously unequal even then. Okay, I don't know why they came up with this kind of decision in 1985. Maybe the brains were not well developed in 1985. But you can see clearly here that they, in this particular case, they actually shot down the petition. And they did not overrule, they did not sort of annul that section. So this woman, so you understood this case, okay, Saumitri Vishnu versus Union of India, where this woman basically, because her lover was being prosecuted under 497, she came to the Supreme Court and said that for the same petition which came this time and which succeeded, but in 1985 it failed. Okay. So the same petition failed in 1985, which was against an attack on 497 of IPC. Now the interesting thing is this Justice Chandrachud 1985, who shot down this petition, but among the judges who actually shot down the 497, so allowed this kind of petition in 2018, his son Dhananjay Chandrachud is on that bench. Okay, so he's on the team of judges who have actually shot down this thing, and his dad in 1985 did not allow the same petition, exactly same petition. And there's no logic actually. If you read this decision, it's really a crazy decision, but it doesn't have there's no logic to it, because it was clearly wrong even in 1985. But anyway, so this is the second decision where, and there was another decision, there's a very famous decision we'll discuss later on, where the same thing had happened, that Justice Chandrachud, his father had ruled in a particular way, but the son Dhananjay Chandrachud has ruled in the opposite way in this modern age. Okay, so this is one example. We can come back. Okay, now one thing here, we're going to use this to learn about something else when you're reading, because you're going to be comfortable with reading judgments. You're going to have to be comfortable reading judgments and reading statutes. So one thing you have to be familiar with is, these are called cause titles. Okay, this part is called the cause title. That is this part, Saumitri Vishnu versus Union of India. This is called a cause title. So you notice here that the person who, so with the term that is used here is petitioner and respondent. Okay, so when we say petitioner on one side, on the other side is the respondent. Okay, so these are terms that we use. So on the one side you would have, maybe I can highlight this verses so that you can see the split clearly. Okay, so on the one side you have applicant or petitioner or appellant or plaintiff or prosecution. Okay, on the one side. So applicant would typically go against opposite party. So they have worded it this way. So when it's applicant on one side, the other side would be opposite party. Okay. So applicant happens when you go to places like quasi-judicial forums like the Rent Control Tribunal, etc. Okay, those places you would use the term application. Okay, so you have an application to the rent controller. Okay, you know that we have the Delhi Rent Control Act. Okay, in every state in India, it's all based on the same kind of the same format. You go to the Delhi Rent Control Act, you go to the West Bengal Premises Tenancy Act, or you go to Madras Rent Control Act. All the provisions are very similar because it's based on the same legislation, same model legislation. So you can have applicant versus opposite party. You can have petitioner versus respondent, as you can see in this case. You have petitioner versus respondent. Okay, or you can have appellant. Appellant is person again who is appealing the case. Okay, the person who's appealing is an appellant. Okay, so appellant and again will be matched with respondent. Okay, and then you have, this is what happens in civil cases, you have plaintiff and on the opposite side is defendant. Okay, and in the criminal cases you have prosecution, okay, which is the prosecution versus the accused. Okay, so whenever somebody is accused of a crime, so you'll have the prosecution will conduct the prosecution against the accused. Okay, so you will have, so in India the criminal cases are all mostly run by there are some exceptions, they're mostly run by the state. Okay, so if there's a crime, if somebody is being prosecuted for a crime in say Pitampura, maybe he robbed a house in Pitampura or something, so it will be state of Delhi versus so and so. Okay, state of Delhi versus the accused. Okay, that will be the citation, the cause title. So is this clear? So when you say, so the way it works is the person who brings the case is mentioned first. Okay, so in this case, since it's a Supreme Court case, so you can actually figure out certain things which will be useful when you're starting to do your judgments. Okay, in the later part of the course, which is, you see here, this is a Supreme Court case, and it says petitioner Saumitri Vishnu. That means that Saumitri Vishnu must have lost in the High Court. Okay, so you come to the Supreme Court after you, certain cases you can come directly, but generally you come after losing an appeal in the High Court. So that means that she must have lost in the High Court, and so therefore she has initiated the motion at the Supreme Court. So whoever initiates the motion is mentioned first. Okay, so you'll have this mentioned first. So if she's mentioned first means, so from this you can understand a few things, that she must have lost in the High Court. Okay, that's why she's brought this thing to the Supreme Court, and that's why her name is mentioned first. Okay, so from the name that is mentioned first, you can see who must have lost in the lower court.
So if a case is turned down in the state court and a high court, it is not allowed to go to the Supreme Court.
No. Where did you see that? No. It might be. See, there is something called a special leave petition. Okay, so normally what happens is that you have to go first through the district court if you're in a normal case. Okay, you go through the district court, and there are various levels of jurisdiction. There's a junior judge, a senior judge, and all that, depending on the amount concerned. So then you go through district court and then to the High Court. And then if you lose in the High Court, you can actually ask the High Court to give you a certificate for appeal. Okay, so if the High Court feels that there is a question of law involved, okay, then they will say, okay, in this question of law, we give you the permission to appeal to the Supreme Court. So if the High Court does not give you that permission, you can still go under what is called the SLP route, which is the special leave petition. So under special, you can still, the High Court has refused permission to you to appeal, but you can still go under the special leave petition to the Supreme Court and then ask them to consider this petition. So you can still do that. Okay. And so, okay. Alright, so here you can see I've given you a link to another MOOC. Okay. This is again, this is not a very high priority MOOC. If you are interested in this particular topic, you can do it. But it's interesting because it considers all kinds of philosophical, moral issues. So there is a course, there's a MOOC from Harvard called Justice. The link here is working, I just checked it. So you can do this MOOC also again if you want. It's another MOOC that you want to do, depending on your areas of interest. Okay. So continuing with these distinctions, okay, with between similar to positive versus normative, okay, those kind of distinctions. We are going to distinguish once again between these two terms, positivism, formalism, versus, again, this is, again, it might seem very theoretical, but actually the idea is quite simple. So just make sure you understand it. Here, okay, so you have realism. You can just take out the legal as a common term outside the brackets, and then you have realism or instrumentalism, okay, on the one side, and you have positivism or formalism on the one side. Okay, these are not exactly the same, but these two are very similar. Positivism and formalism are very similar. Realism and instrumentalism are very similar. Okay, and then the distinction between the two is again very similar to normative versus positive. Okay. So here you can see essentially what happened in legal positivism is, this is actually a movement that started in England. Okay, there's a guy called John Austin who is associated with that. Essentially what was happening is, there was at that time in England, okay, there was in this time like this, when he was like in the mid 19th centuries, early mid 19th centuries, there was a lot of talk about, you know, people were looking at the law and basically looking at legal provisions and saying, kind of like what you were saying, that no, this is not moral, this is not ethical, this is this should not be allowed. Okay, so they were actually trying to mix up the morality and the ethics of questions with what actually the law was providing for. So they were actually going to the extent of saying that certain legal provisions are not acceptable because they are not moral. Okay, they are not ethical. So certain legal provisions they wanted to ignore, and certain things they wanted to enforce even though they were not written down in the law, because they felt that this was immoral or unethical. Okay, so this is actually a reaction. Basically, this, I don't know if I've written that here. It's actually a reaction to this kind of mood that prevailed in England at that time. Okay, so this was known as natural law. I can just write this down here briefly. Reaction to what is called natural law legal theory. Okay, so here what they were saying is that the natural law, the law given by God, this is not moral, this particular legal provision is not correct. Okay, so John Austin wanted to basically complain about that kind of thinking. He was trying to say that don't mix up legality and morality on the one side with don't mix up legality and morality. Okay, so he was trying to say that focus on what is legal. Okay, what is legal is what the law, according to the process that you go through Parliament. You go through Parliament, and then the Parliament decides that certain thing is a law. Then the Queen gives assent to the law. So that makes something a law. Now, when something is a law, then we are not going to be talking about whether the law is moral or immoral. It doesn't matter. What matters is that this is the law of the land. So whatever law has been laid down, that is the law. That is what is legal, and violations of that are illegal. So don't worry about don't bring into this the discussion of what is moral or immoral, or moral or immoral or unethical. So this is essentially what it was. So legal positivism, essentially, it comes from the word posited. Have you heard this word? It's a little bit unusual. Maybe you've not heard about this. Okay, so it's like positing means I say something. Okay, I posit that the earth is flat. Okay, that means I'm positing means I'm putting forward a proposition. Okay, I posit that the earth is flat. Okay, so that's how the word is used. So positivism comes from that basically the legislature with the assent of the Queen has basically said that this is the law. The law has been written down this way, And so then there are no more questions permitted on whether this law is moral or immoral. Whether you think it's moral or immoral, you still have to follow this law. So that's essentially what it was saying. Okay. So again, this seems similar to normative or positive. Positive, right? Because it is actually making you look at what is the law. It is not concerned with whether you consider this law to be proper or improper or illegal. You are not concerned with whether this should be the law. You may have an opinion that this should not be the law, but that is not relevant. What legal positivism was essentially saying is that your opinion about the morality or ethical characteristics of a particular law is not relevant. What is relevant is whether this law was properly enacted, went through parliament, got the assent of the Queen, so that now it's a law. Okay, and that's it. So essentially this was a movement against this prevailing natural law theories that were corrupting the atmosphere in England at that time, according to Austin. And he wanted to bring back the focus of society to what the written law says. Okay, so this is essentially what positivism is all about. Okay, legal positivism, and it's very so you can see here that it is very similar to what is meant. What we say is, it is positive rather than normative. He was trying to focus people on positive rather than normative. Okay, and so something that is very similar to legal positivism is the idea of legal formalism. Okay, formalism is again a movement or a judicial philosophy. Okay, which is important to understand in the law. So legal formalism again is the same thing. It basically, if you follow legal formalism, okay, you are someone who believes that the law should be interpreted as it is written. Okay, so whatever the law says, you should follow that. We'll give you an example very soon. And you cannot go outside the law even if you think that that should be done. Even if you think that whatever the law is saying is immoral or unethical, okay, even if you think that breaking the law would actually not following the written law would be the moral thing to do or the ethical thing to do, you still cannot do it because you are bound by what the written law says. Is this clear? This is the philosophy. This is a judicial philosophy, and we'll see it very soon in this example. Okay, here you can see the theoretical explanation of this. Okay. So judges should not apply their minds on what is in the interest of society or what is the public opinion or this and that. They are only concerned with interpreting the law in a mechanical way. Whatever the law says, you interpret that in the mechanical way and then you pronounce judgment. Okay, so it's a judicial philosophy. It's very important to understand the difference between formalism and what we'll see is the opposite of this. Okay, and that is realism or instrumentalism. Okay. You can see here that it differs from realism. Before we understand realism, let's just briefly look at this example. Okay, you remember here what happened in the Nirbhaya case? Yes. That there was this juvenile who was also convicted. Okay, and then there was this debate about the release of the juvenile. Okay, so this is the article about the changes in the juvenile law, but I'll just highlight the other one. But you remember there was a case when the Supreme Court refused, because under the juvenile law, after a period he was supposed to be released, right? And there was a huge public outcry about this because people did not think that he should have been released because they thought he was equally guilty, right? So I think the public opinion was overwhelmingly in favor of not releasing the juvenile, right? Public opinion was overwhelmingly in favor of not releasing the juvenile, but you read what the Supreme Court says here. So first here you can see the Supreme Court, this is basically December 22, okay, 2015. So they refused to stay the release, okay. Refused to stay the release means the release was allowed, okay. They refused to stay the release. So what is the Supreme Court saying here? Now look at the second paragraph. You can read the second paragraph. So this is the classic example of what is meant by legal formalism. That the Supreme Court can see, and I'm sure maybe even the judges themselves personally felt that the guy should not have been released. And they were very clear, it was very clear to everyone that public opinion was overwhelmingly in favor of not releasing him. But what the Supreme Court does is here they are following this judicial philosophy of what is called legal formalism. They are following the letter of the law, and they are saying that the law makes it very clear that the juvenile cannot be detained beyond 3 years. Is this clear? Okay, so this is a classic example of legal formalism. So this is very important to understand, because you will see that many of the decisions are being made in a particular way because certain judges subscribe to certain types of philosophies. Okay, mostly this is pretty unusual actually in India, because you get a lot of the opposite type of rulings in India now, because judges are bringing their own social views into it. But in the early days in India, when we had the 1950s and mid 50s or so, mid 50s, late 50s, we had some very nice. You guys have heard about Muhammad Hidayatullah? Okay, he was actually a vice president also, but he was one of the greatest judges of India. His rulings, if you read Hidayatullah's rulings, in fact, you can do this if you want to improve your understanding of the law and also the English. The English is very good. You can just go and read up, look at Hidayatullah's judgments. Okay, that's your alarm. That's your online alarm, so that I don't detain you. Okay, guys, we can stop this now. Let me first stop the alarm. Where is the alarm? Okay. All right, this is meant to ensure that I don't detain you beyond that exact time and we don't have to track. Okay, guys, so what we'll do is, so you understood legal formalism, we will continue